good old Johnson and his collection of people from posh boys' schools and chances, going to make it even worse. But my sense is the thing has to get worse before it can get better.
Ed, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. You are author of Stand and Deliver and More. You're systems thinker who's worked in government and in private industry, co-host of the wonderful podcast, The Hidden Power, and you're chair and trustee of the think tank Demos. Welcome to the show.
I was. Yeah.
Not anymore.
No. That finished some time ago.
Oh, it says that on your website. I was just taking off that's there in the about section.
I'm terribly sorry about that. I'll have to get in there and correct it. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Anyway, well, that's something I've learned already. So that's a good start. So why don't you describe for us what exactly systems thinking is? Because that's the general theme of your podcast. So for people who maybe don't get what that means, it sounds a very sort of contrived term, but it's really important, I think, for how we discuss government politics and our country. So why don't you give us an explanation?
Yeah, it's something happens, and it's about standing back and sort of trying to get into what's happening and why it's happening and so on, and not just taking something at face value. So I'll give you an example. I'm on the train. This is a year or two ago. It's jammed. The announcement comes over the tannoy. This was when it was Virgin Trains. It's because of half term. Yeah, so half term, load of people travelling. And then you go, well, that's terribly interesting. Is this half-term thing not predictable? Didn't it happen last year? Don't you know when it's supposed to be going on? So why is it that you don't do what British Rail used to do and put on extra trains? And you go back and you find that the contracts for the privatised railways don't include any provision for half term and actually providing a flexible service for half term. Then you stand back and you say, well, why on earth do the contracts not include this? And then you go back into the Department of Transport and you find that you've got a lot of civil servants there who in many respects are very able, but actually none of them, by and large, have ever run a contract. None of them have ever run a railway, have no grasp. And so you're beginning to build up a bigger picture of why we're sitting there squashed in this particular environment. And the more you look at situations of concern, and particularly you look at how much of a mess there is everywhere, you realize that it's people often leap onto the person. It's this politician's problem, it's that political party, it's this leader, and it becomes personalized. And actually it's the system. And I've often said that if I were working in the system of governing that we have, if I were in the House of Commons, well, frankly, I wouldn't be doing any better than anyone else is there, because the system is, to use another term, and do stop me if this all gets too much, it's structurally determined to do what it does, and you get out the end. It's like cats. They're structurally determined to kill birds. Terribly sorry, whether we like it or not, cats are going to kill birds. Well, I'm terribly sorry. The system of governing we've got is structurally determined to produce the results that we get.
I mean, that's the theme I came across in, there's a great book by Isabel Harding. I think I've got it over here. Isabel Hardman. Sorry, apologies, Isabel. It's called Why We Get the Wrong Politicians. And it's one of the first books that I had ever read on the British political system that was really actually exploring the reasons for getting the people we get. Because I know I've lamented, and I'm not alone, definitely, the sheer seeming incompetence of of the people that we have in power, and the system's ability to solve the problems that we have today in the 21st century. I mean, I literally this morning was writing an intro for the first chapter of my second book, so that's going to be fun. But the first chapter is basically, it's called Invisible Threats, and it's like just going through, like starting with COVID, because that's the main theme of the book and what happened with it. But climate change, pollution, information and cyber warfare, the financialization of our economy, censorship, and social media, and all of these things are problems that it's not like we don't know they're a problem. It's that we simply don't know, like our system is just struggling to deal with them. Even just if you look at the report that was put out on social media's influence on the Brexit vote, and the report by the DCMS committee, and they were just saying, look, our electoral commission needs more power to deal with this, and yet nothing has been done. It's 4 years since the vote. We still have the exact same problems, and we're not moving forward with it. And it was actually quite refreshing for me to come across first this book, and then yourself and your podcast, where you're trying to understand like the actual system that gives us the results that we get, rather than the people who are attempting to grapple with the system itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the example I always use, if you take gender balance in the House of Commons, but anywhere, you go over to Switzerland, and they have a very different system of governing there. And the power is decentralized to what's called the cantons, which are the local government. You know, Geneva is the biggest at 500,000 people. The smallest is 28,000. They then operate through high levels of decentralization. In fact, the Constitution says, you know, the federation, which is what it is, would only do those things which can't be done locally. You then find at the federal level, there's a federal, who's the Prime Minister or President of Switzerland? No one knows because there isn't one. They have a President of the Council who is only President for a year. The ruling council is always a coalition, and that job rotates. My word, what do you find? On balance, there's always equal or indeed even more women in their federal council on average. And it's because of the system and the way in which people can come through that system. You take the constitutions that are around, and of course, I mean, the UK constitution is sort of almost disappeared to nothing other than that which the judges tell a government it can't do. But you take a constitution like the US constitution, well, I mean, that was developed in 200 years ago. So here's a piece of technology that we're trying to run the modern world with, which is 200 years ago. Well, I mean, if you went into a hospital and said, fine, I'm okay, I've got problems with my brain, I'm very happy, please apply what you were doing 200 years ago in order to cure me, you'd say, you must be mad, mate. Well, that's precisely what we do with our constitution. So you take your point, which is absolutely spot on about the Electoral Commission. Well, unless that is put into a constitution, and a constitution is, if you like, a meta law that sits above the politicians, the political parties, and all the rest of it, and can only be changed by essentially the population saying, yeah, these are the rules of the game that apply to you down there who are meant to be serving us. So unless that electoral commission requirement goes into the constitution, the politicians will fiddle with it. It's like, you know, if you take a game of football, which has some very well developed rules that make it the game it is, well, the way politics and government works in Britain is that once a team is winning, they can change the rules. So there you are. You're Manchester United against Arsenal. You score a goal. Alex Ferguson pops up and works out that actually they've got some super whizzy fast forwards. So we're going to adapt the offside rule to negate their influence. And that's actually what happens precisely when you don't have a constitution which sets the rule book for the politicians and the government.
Mm. No, I want to get to your discussion about how we need a constitution. You're not the only person that's talked to me about this, but I want to start with so you're a systems thinker, and we are essentially proposing here that the British system of government is broken.
Yeah.
So, like, what analysis would you use to on any system you were trying to look at or assess or analyze? Like, what markers do you look for to say that a system is broken? Like, what are like the fundamental like red flags that come up and where you say, okay, we need to fix this?
Yeah. The biggest one is feedback. Okay, so any organization and you know, a company, indeed a local voluntary organization, anything has to have feedback on the results or outcomes of what it's done. You take a company and you say, okay, just carry on. You know, you don't need profit and loss statements. You don't need to know where your sales are. You don't need to know what products, how well received they are by the customers. You just carry on. Well, pretty soon you'll go bust. And it's a truism across organizations. You need feedback. Look at government. There we are. Brum. Here's a law. They all get terribly excited. They passed a law. Worth saying at that point, what is a law? Well, a law is words on a piece of paper. It has absolutely no worth until it's put into action, into effect. Now, we bung these laws out. There have been 3,500 new laws on top of all the other ones in the reign of the current Queen. So there's piles of laws, even more piles of regulations, piles of policies, piles of statutes, piles of new organizations. Are they working? And actually, we don't know. So the laws accumulate, and some of them do work, a lot of them don't work. Well, if you don't know where you are or where you're going or whether you're getting there, then you know it's inevitable that you'll end up with what we get. So what happens in the absence of feedback? And there's another point of feedback I'll come on in a minute. In the absence of feedback, you get politicians rhetorically massaging statistics, spinning, briefing to prove that it's all fine. And that's that particular piece of infrastructure. Of course, you can't leave to the politicians. You have to take it outside the political arena. So you've got some independent, comprehensive sense of whether these things are happening. Now, the other point about feedback is that, okay, you get some feedback and it says, yeah, the law's not working, to take a simple example. And you need something to happen. You take a thermostat on the wall, okay? You set it to 20. When it goes over the 20, it goes click and it turns the boiler off. When it goes below 20, it goes click and it turns the boiler on. And you need the same thing in government. So there is a power called abandonment, which was the phrase that Peter Drucker used in 1969. You need a power of abandonment that says, right, you know, it may be very well intentioned, it may be important, but it's not working. Click, we've turned it off. That's the first one, is feedback. The second big one is what we call the citizen branch. So you have representative democracy, which has become, in effect, vote and go away. So lots of interest on the citizens and the voters coming up to the election, a sort of bit just after the election. Otherwise, we're not here. So we need what's called the citizen branch, which is about participative and deliberative democracy in between times, particularly for really difficult issues. A really difficult issue is called abortion. The Irish government, the politicians were really afraid of touching this, but because they've got some history of using citizens' assemblies and engagement to address which started off in times of the Good Friday Agreement, to address those issues, and they got very practiced at doing it. They did it really, really well. Meantime, here we are with Brexit, and we'll have a referendum. And it's a free-for-all. And it's sort of people piling in every direction with all sorts of mud, fake news, and God knows what. We don't need that. We do need what Ireland did. So you've got the citizen branch. The third area, I mean, there are others, but the third area that I really put my finger on is what I call preferential lobbying. So this is whereby, I mean, typically it can be all sorts of big organizations, but typically the wealthy, big business, big industry lobby like mad. It wasn't always thus. And indeed, it's not natural or the way things need to happen. There are all sorts of reasons why preferential lobbying excludes the citizen, excludes us from any seat at the decision table. And therefore, what you find is that in politics and in policy, decisions are skewed more and more and more to what industry and business want. What you find is that, of course, this is all about wealth appropriation. It's not about wealth creation, because a lobby will come in, they want a tax rate change, they want a regulation change, they want to prevent, I mean, a classic one was in the States, where a company called Intuit have a piece of software which helps people to fill in their tax returns. Tax returns in the US are formidably complicated, and you either need the software or you need an advisor, even if you're a relatively poor person. So Intuit has built this big business with this piece of software. In California, shock horror, they've got tax simplification going on. This is a scandal. What happens if this goes throughout the US? We're going to lose money. Pile in the lobbies, pile in the conversations with congressmen that say, oh, terribly interesting, Congressman, you know, we're always out to, you know, give donations to the right people. Pause in conversation, terribly interesting. You know, we really think the tax simplification laws are all wrong for whatever reason. There is never any explicit deal, but each side understands. So the money piles over to the congressman votes against any tax simplification. Hey presto, Intuit keep this pile of money for themselves at the expense of citizens. And that writ large is an awful lot of what happens. Then you find, guess what? People feel, you know, we have absolutely no power. What the hell are we going to do? Oh my God, populism rises up. Because, I mean, what are you going to do? You know, you're going to vote for one of these leaders who says, you know, we need to drain the swamp. Well, yeah, we need to drain the swamp. So we have Trump and we have Johnson and Bolsonaro and et cetera. Not a solution, alas. But your point, Josh, you're making there, that all of these detrimental things that we observe actually stem from that single cause of vast systems of government, is absolutely spot on.
I mean, I've always been vaguely obsessed with asking, like, why does that happen? If I get like something bad happen to me, I'm really bad at just accepting that that's like how it is. I really like, I can get really obsessively irritated by it.
This proves that you are inherently a systems thinker, because children arrive in the world, and they're clawing around, and so suddenly they start asking these really annoying questions. Why? Why? I mean, it can get quite embarrassing. Is that man standing next to me so fat? Why? I mean, a classic one I had. Why time, Daddy? Well, that's a big one. But why are the leaves green? Why this? Why that? Brilliant. But then we as parents, it's like, oh God, I can't cope. Please go and play with your toys. Shut up. Then you get into school. School is this sort of massive socialization process, which basically is saying, okay, there are limits to the world. We've all got to live together. So, we'll just have this sort of box of national curriculum and behavior. And the whys start to dry out. Systems thinkers are people who never have stopped asking the question, why?
I mean, the thing that I've always thought it was that, or I find anyway, if I can find like some explanation for like a poor decision or something bad that's happened in my life or in the world or in politics, if I can understand what it is, it gives me like a little bit of comfort that at least I know there's a reason for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think people, there's a classic, right, here's, okay, there's a waterfall near us, big waterfall. And in fact, it's so dangerous that people do die on it. The latest was actually a child didn't die and sort of came down and was rescued. At the bottom, lots of official signs saying danger, do not swim, fine, okay, no why. And then some local folks have written on the ground, in the last 5 years, 4 people have died in this pool. The problem in the pool is it gets very cold, and you could, it looks beautiful, dive in rapidly, you'll get muscle paralysis. And that sign there giving the why has so much more impact. And I'm totally with you. If only every public authority, indeed every private authority, had an obligation to tell us why we can't do something or should do something, it would help.
Yeah, I definitely think that'll probably help us in our current situation where the why is a big part of people's questioning of government policy on COVID. Like, I think that would probably quell a lot of people's concerns about it. Like, because I get people, a lot of the concern about it is that they've gone authoritarian, and it's because absent of the reason why, people speculate. And when the evidence points to they're getting authoritarian, whilst it could still point to they're trying to protect us, that without their actual physical explanation, and like you see if Boris Johnson sat down for 3 hours on a live stream and with like 4 scientists and explained like in detail the research that they've done, the reasons for their policies, what they are thinking, then I honestly feel like I could accept it more, because there would be explanation. Like, I could disagree with the explanation, but it would at least give me an idea.
And then, given that we're now informed, we understand, we are actually motivated, rather than just being enforced, off you go. And, it's like, okay, I understand that. And I mean, in terms of us all sort of trying to avoid COVID, we're all trying to piece together, because it's a new situation. It's one of high uncertainty, which is particularly where you need systems thinking. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
That's all right. I was going to ask you about the idea of a citizens' assembly, because you kind of touched on it there. And do you think that this could genuinely be a thing that would work in the UK?
Well, they certainly work. Point one. And indeed, I mean, the Irish abortion referendum is a classic. They've been running quite a lot of them on climate change in France. The the crucial thing, though, is that they have to be part of the system. So in the UK, it's almost certain that, I mean, there are some running on climate change now, and they are linked into some of the parliamentary committees, but that they're not linked into government. But essentially saying, you know, this is something that is a legitimate and established part of how we take decisions and we take notice of them. So citizens' assemblies, a lot of people, I'm not of the view that, you know, people are really too dumb to understand these things. All experience, and I mean, you only have to look at a jury trial. And preferably be on a jury trial, which my wife, I've never been on one actually, but my wife was. And you got 12 people, a great range of people, you know, anything from, I don't know, the refuse collector through to a doctor. And the capacity of people, if provided with information, education, knowledge, data, to go, yeah, on balance, there. There was a classic one, Channel 4 did it years and years ago on capital punishment. And it was within a studio, but it was a citizens' assembly, randomly selected group of people from all over the place. Capital punishment, okay, vote. First of all, are you in favour or against? The majority were in favour. Went through a process of deliberation, all of the upsides, downsides, and all the rest of it, at the end of which the majority were against. So I mean, this really is a piece of constitutional technology, to give it that term, that does work, that is powerful, that gets us back involved. You know, we're supposed to be living democracies, but most of us haven't noticed for quite a long time. It gets us involved. Having made a decision, back to your point, we're then motivated to do it. So yeah, but of course, the people at the centre who got into these positions of power, the politicians, the government ministers, and the higher you go, the more it is that you're interested in power. That's their principal motivation. And if you get there and then you say, oh, by the way, I'd like a bit of that power over here with people, and you're sort of not going to have an awful lot of involvement. You know, you're going to do what it says. This is not popular. So again, it comes back to having a rule book that says, bad luck, politicians. I'm not here for your egos or your power needs. You're here to operate a system that's going to work for us all.
I mean, I guess there's people. I don't know about made fun of, but definitely disparaged that phrase, take back control, that was put forward in the Brexit debate. And I honestly don't think that there is a more important phrase in British politics that really defines like the issue that we have, because I feel like, I mean, this is one of the points I make in my book, which you can pre-order in the link below, anyone that wants to.
I will. What's it called, John?
It's called Brexit, the Establishment Civil War.
Brilliant.
And one of the things I kind of looked at in it was the fact that like everyone just assumed that like the Brexiteers were just racists and they hated the EU and they were really mad about something. And they were mad about immigrants or I don't think people took a long time to really understand it. And I still think people haven't. But like one of the things that I really came across was there was a guy who's, what was his name? David Sumpter. And he wrote this great book called Somewheres or Somewheres versus Anywheres, or the road to somewhere. That's what it was. And he was talking about the sense of like dislocation from the modern world, from democracy, from like the way the country used to run, that a lot of older people have felt like disappearing. Like they literally have felt like the control of their lives in every aspect, from like what the government is saying to like what you can say online, to the sort of rise of unaccountable power in terms of big corporations lobbying for policy, and politicians lapping up their money and their legislation that they write for them and then give to them. And that like people, as you say, understand that, okay, maybe they don't get the specifics and the exact reasons for having that feeling, but people are incredibly intelligent at understanding when something isn't right. And I also think that people don't get enough credit. Like the most popular show in the world for I don't know how many years there was Game of Thrones, and it is not an easy story to follow. That is not a simple like 30-minute sitcom. Like you're talking about huge, expansive storylines with 20 different like main characters and intertwining things, and people were in love with this show. Like I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, I mean, I think you're totally spot on there. I mean, the thing with Brexit and Trump that struck me so hard was that, well, you know, why would people do this? You know, even in the last election, I mean, 70 million people voted for Trump.
73 million.
73 million, sorry. Including, I mean, I'm sure, you know, including a higher proportion for a Republican candidate of Black women, Latinos, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you know, why are people so desperate to do this? Well, and why are they so desperate to vote for Brexit? And of course, with Brexit, it was the only thing they could do to sort of go, hang on, we're fed up. And it's not difficult once you get into the economics and the impact of neoliberalism to see the way in which inequality has been driven, and the classic stuff about the left behind, which Mark Blythe, have you? I don't know whether you follow him anyway. He really does a good job at explaining how actually they're not just left behind, but their incomes have dropped and dropped and dropped in the States, and it's the same in this country. And people are going, what the hell we do? And of course the Barnier, I think it was, the EC commissioner, said a lot of people throughout Europe feel that their cultural identity is endangered, and it's become endangered because of the mass migration that's going on within Europe. And you can't just say, well, you know, this is terribly good for you and it's terribly good for everyone, and you know, off you go and get on with it, when rightly or wrongly you feel that your incomes are static or going down, and you see a load of immigrants arriving, doing all of these jobs. And of course, particularly in Britain with the education system, particularly the vocational education system, and here's another part of the systemic picture, leaves many people coming out of school underskilled or indeed unskilled. Compare that with continental Europe, where vocational education is the norm from 15 onwards, and here are all these highly skilled competitors coming towards you. On top of that, actually, free movement of labour is a fundamental of neoliberalism, because it means you can drag labour from anywhere and the price goes down and down and down. So that, I mean, there are all these influences going on which cause people to do apparently crazy things like Brexit. And of course I mean, the other thing that goes on, just the resentment that this leaves with the left behind. And then what happens? You know, you start othering, and it you know, it doesn't really matter who the other is, but you know, some of it comes out in out and out racism, or incipient racism, which yeah, it's bad, but why don't we get back, as I think you're doing, to the origins of the cause, and then, you know, we might be able to actually improve the situation.
I mean, it was like you're so right. You can't just tell people, oh, you should be happy with the world. You know, everything's fine. just accept that we think it's fine, and you should just vote how we want, and that's how it should be. Like it's such a crazy idea. Like, and it's a point I've made numerous times already since the U.S. election, was that all of the Democrats, all of them, they're all just ignoring the fact that 73 million people voted for Donald Trump. They just they have no desire to confront what that is. And like, people can debate what it is exactly, but there's something that makes like 73 million people vote for someone that you have told everyone is the worst person for that job, the worst person, just period, for 4 years straight, and they still went out and voted for him. But more of them, like way more than last time.
And it was like, you go back to Obama, who, was, I've never met him, but as far as I can tell, he's a decent human being. Certainly his speeches, lay out an agenda of humanity and concern and all the rest of it. When he found a bit of power, he did Obamacare in the health service. But that once he got into power, he was in this system. And the system is dominated by money and corporate money, and at the end of that is Wall Street. So it's like, okay, Obama arrives with all these great ideas and thoughts, and then he says, hang on, chum, that's not it. Over here, it's a Wall Street government, mate. So off you go and get on with it. So, I mean, he got through, but then they put up Hillary Clinton, who I'm not sure she was a terribly good candidate anyway. And it's like, the situation is going to stay the same. You're still going to be shafted, but at least they're a Democrat. And it's like, well, I'm not terribly sure. I mean, if only Bernie Sanders had stood against Trump, then I think he might well have got through. It's the same in this country, where, for goodness sake, the Labour Party, and it's the same with the Democrats, has lost touch with the working class. I mean, there's a sort of clue in the name, the Labour Party. This is the party of people who labour, but it's now dominated by professional, educated middle classes, often living in big cities, who have actually done quite well out of the prevailing system, and are sort of, I'm terribly sorry to say it, but are the haves. And yet all of these have-nots, they've lost touch with, they don't understand. Actually, they often criticise and ridicule and stigmatise. And I don't know whether the Labour Party will ever reconnect with the working class, the working people, but at present it's not.
No, I mean, I think honestly, the death cry is the fact that Sir Keir Starmer is now the head of the working class party. I mean that's just, and you're right as well. It's the benefactors of neoliberalism that are now running the party that is meant to be representing the victims of that system. And it's a difficult, I don't know where you go from here, because so one of the things I wanted to ask you about actually is like, so we can sit here and we can lament the British political system, and we can think a lot about how we might, about where we might want to end up in terms of like what we want. So like a written constitution, perhaps reform of like a second legislative body or chamber, perhaps like electoral reform. But
yes, absolutely.
But before that, we have to figure out how we completely like reform and like reconstruct the train we're on while it's still on the track, and it's going forward at 100 miles an hour through a bunch of barriers that I kind of laid out earlier. The invisible threats as such that I think are coming for us, and like where do we even begin to try and decentralize that power that you've said sort of concentrates at the top, and then as soon as you get there, everyone goes, well, no, we can't be giving that away.
Yes. I'm very active in the campaign for proportional representation through a thing called Make Votes Matter. And I think that, well, that certainly is a major lever. And if it's possible to get the Labour Party to put that into their manifesto, not we're going to do it, but we're going to have a proper process, including a citizens' convention, for addressing it, and then hopefully put it into law. Because, I mean, these two parts, I mean, if you get a duopoly, you know, it's like, oh, there are only two supermarket chains. There are only two car manufacturers. You know, are you happy with that? I mean, what sort of standards are, well, they're just going to go, ugh. And that's what's happened when you get two political parties. The same situation coincidentally in the States. Around continental Europe and indeed around the world, where you've got PR, things are not as bad as they are in Britain. And you can look at the trust in government measures and all the rest of it. That said, you know, the rest of the world is also pretty much a mess. So there's a lot more to be done. But I think in terms of freeing up, the second thing is that I'm very much of the view now that just do stuff locally. You know, try and get your village, your group, your community, your interest. I don't know, is there a helicopter noise coming in?
There's a little bit, yeah.
Okay, they're rescuing people possibly, or just having a practice. Hopefully they'll go away.
So I should be able to take some of that out when I do the edit.
Okay. Yeah. So local stuff. I mean, an extremely small example. We live on a stretch of road which is a 30-mile-an-hour thing, and it's there for, you know, I'm not into you must drive at 30 miles an hour because it says 30 miles an hour. I mean, there is a why, as you said earlier. There's goats, sheep, cattle, rocks, trees, people, etc. They're just around the corner. Our wall has been demolished twice. But there's also noise, which is litter. So the council for years and years, will you put repeater signs up? Just, you know, 30, remind people, which most people do take notice of, not everyone. Anyway, I've never done it. So I bought some 30-mile-an-hour signs and I went and put them up. And in the sense that I grew up in the 60s and direct action was what we did. And I really, you might say that's terribly old-fashioned. I don't think it is. It's like, should we just sort of seize the time and get on and do stuff? I think the second thing is pushing back against any sort of mindless bureaucracy. And of course, often you just, I mean, if you're applying for benefits, well, you have to go through the mindless bureaucracy. I appreciate any time you get an opportunity, particularly in your organization. So I've been told by the Open University that I have to complete e-learning on what's called prevent counterterrorism. Prevent. Yeah, that's it. I think so. Something like that. Anyway, it's all about people becoming terrorists and spotting them early. Now, yeah, I can see your expression, Josh. Let's pursue the point, which is that here's an objective. Okay, we do want to prevent people, charging down London Bridge and killing people, but I have no contact with students whatsoever. I'm an unpaid visiting research fellow. So I wrote back and said, look, I could just about understand. I mean, whether does it work? Come on. But I could. So I've come back and said, Terry, okay, your policy is that I have to do this. Well, I'm terribly sorry. My policy is that I don't do anything unless there's a good reason. And just push back, push back, push back. And it might be companies, it might be, you know, the dreaded Google or the dreaded Amazon and these sort of big corporate monsters we can avoid. There's all of that talking, this sort of stuff, you know, where we gradually change the political discourse. We talk to our neighbours, we change their minds, we change their ways of thinking. I mean, people are talking about a civil war in the States. You know, I mean, serious talk about a civil war. The social dilemma, have you, you know, yeah, I mean, and the end of that, but also others. There's a piece in the FT the other day about their constitution. And I can just feel that we're not so far. I mean, from the revolution, from people revolting. Now, how that form of revolt, I don't think it'll be armed, but in the sense of saying, look, enough is enough, for Christ's sake. But it is this sort of podcast where people can go, you know, people are hooked on, they're addicted to politics and the sort of adversarial debates, and then they're hooked on, oh, you know, the wonders of Boris Johnson, or indeed the wonders of Jeremy Corbyn. Well, sorry, lads, this isn't going to make very much difference at all. Indeed, you could vote for me. It still wouldn't make very much difference. But I mean, to come back to I mean, the way I envisage this, Josh, is that at some point or other, we need to get onto the agenda and into action, progressively changing the system of governing in the ways in which and other ways in which we've talked about. That is a program for a government, you know, this would take 4 or 5 years. But what do you do about the other stuff? Well, actually, by and large, don't touch it. So, yeah, we've got a sort of malfunctioning-ish, all right-ish health system. Well, don't fiddle around with it again, because it's been fiddled around with since Thatcher's day, continuously. We're reforming it. Oh, bugger me, it's still not reformed. There's the surprise. Schools, ditto. So just keep away. Only deal with the things you have to deal with, the pandemic being an extreme example. Yeah, sorry, shall I stop talking for a minute?
That's all right. Don't worry. Like you said, podcasts are where you can discuss things. Like if you feel you have to have some more things to say, that's fine. I'm just taking this all in.
Okay, well, it's the end state fallacy. Right, there we are. Manifestos. Here we are. I'm offering you, the voter, a shopping list of our policies. And the other lot are going, here you are, here's a shopping list of our policies. But actually, you find that in practice, every policy is an experiment. Okay, we've passed the law, and now we put it into practice. And now, you know, what happens? Well, because of the system that it enters of great complexity, which has all of us human beings hanging off the end, and quite what we're going to do as individuals and let alone as groups is unknown. So that's an experiment. You have a welfare policy, you're intending to do this, but actually where does it end up? Every policy is an experiment. So this notion that you can policyize an end state into existence is complete and utter nonsense by and large. So you then say, well, hang on, why on earth do we have manifestos where all these people are saying we're going to create this wonderful world that looks like that? Well, it doesn't work like that, chums. You know, it's a completely different basis. So something I think we can all do is to say, well, you know, why are you offering me all of these policies? Why not offer me how the system, you're going to change it, that will make good things happen, rather than this is the good thing that's going to happen.
I mean, that speaks very much to the ideas of, I think it was the US military actually did some studies on what was the best way to get like results out of their like different units, officers, generals, and sort of up and down the hierarchy. And they found that the best way to do it was to for example, give like a unit and this commander like their goal, and then just let them sort it out themselves. And they find like the US military run a lot of studies on a lot of things because they have a lot of money to burn because of their outrageous budget, but also because to be the best military in the world, you have to understand how to get the best out of people. And they did some really expansive and comprehensive studies on how to get the most out of even the lowest, smallest cogs in their system. And it was to give them as much autonomy as possible in achieving the goal that had already been set for them. So you set them the goal and you say, this is what we want. And then they allowed their officers or soldiers to figure out the best way to do it. And they put enough trust in the people who are actually carrying out the task to figure out the best way in which to do it, so that they were like decentralizing control of it. And honestly, I think that's something that's really is really coming to me at the minute, like the big overarching structure versus like what people can do on like a really local level. Because I used to believe that like the best solution for climate change was like a big, huge government program. And slowly over the last couple of years, I've come to the conclusion that there is literally the best solution is the absolute and complete opposite of that. It is to get people at an individual level to sort themselves out and say, look, guys, here's some ideas. Here's some things we're going to help you with. Like we're going to like make it easier for you to put solar panels in, or we're going to make it easier for you to compost or have like a community garden. But like ultimately, like the world changes when one person, just starting with one person, decides that they are going to make something slightly better of their life. And they start with that, and then it spreads out a little bit to the community, and then or their family or their circle of friends, and then maybe they inspire one other person to do something good. And slowly, like these things like ripple out faster than you could probably ever imagine. Whereas at the minute, I feel like on a lot of issues that we're like it's an analogy you used actually, is that Tony Blair got to number 10, and he realized he had all these levers and buttons to do stuff, but they weren't actually doing anything.
Well, I mean, that's an incredibly rich commentary you've made there, Josh. I mean, what you describe in terms of the US military and their style, that's also exactly the philosophy of Toyota. That make some of the most reliable, highest quality cars.
And Nissan, and they went into a Nissan factory, was it? Was it Nissan? And they
could have been.
It was like failing, and they took over. It didn't change any of the workforce, and they just asked them how to fix it. Yeah, I know the study you mean.
And that notion that actually this knowledge of how you best fit the rear axle. Well, why should I know? You fit it. Off you go and do it. A. B. US military, big users of systems thinking. You may not like them, but by God, as you say, they're really, really thinking. Ashby's law of requisite variety, sorry to introduce this, but basically says, if you're going to control something from the center, you need to know as much about what's going on, well, in Innsbruck, for the sake of argument, as those people in Innsbruck do. And you can do that if it's something very simple, like issuing a driving license. For almost anything else, you're never going to have enough knowledge and information at the center to be able to exercise that control. So, again, it sort of plays back to decentralization in a massive way. Exactly what you say in terms of climate change. We're doing the same thing here. Encouraging, developing, being consumers of local food, because it doesn't take someone with a brain the size of a pallet to work out that actually flying food all around the world for all sorts of reasons is not a runner. So doing those things. just back to the US military, they've done their systems thinking, what are the biggest threats the US military are going to have to deal with?
I think they define climate change as the biggest threat, right?
Exactly. So climate change, which will induce mass migration from the South and Central Americas up to the middle of America. And then secondly, civil disorder, where competition for resources, indeed even food, will break out. So the US military knows what's happening. It'd be a jolly good idea for one or two governments, rather than sort of talking endlessly about it. Because, I mean, that's the thing about the planet, the biosphere. It sort of doesn't listen to the Today programme or politicians or read the news or take any notice of policies. If you keep throwing pollution into it, it will get more and more upset. And then at some point or other, it's a sort of flash to bang time, when there's an explosion, you see the flash, and then it takes a hell of a long time before you hear the bang, and the shockwave comes and kills you. And the planet's the same, the flash to bang time is so enormous. But by God, there's a hell of a bang on its way. We need to stop upsetting the biosphere because it's bigger than us.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things about the climate change the argument is that a lot of the pushback about, say, like a carbon tax, for example, is that it's just like another way for arbitrary control from the top down. And like the decentralization of a lot of things is for like if Boris Johnson really wanted to be the libertarian that he claims to have been, that we've seen a lot in his speeches, especially against Brexit, to be that champion of the people, just like, you've got a green industrial revolution you've launched, you're saying that you want Britain to be ahead of everyone. Please, I beg of you, put a solar panel on every single available space of roof that there is. Just everywhere, like literally everywhere. It doesn't have to be that hot. You just need to get sun, because solar panels actually function better at lower temperatures, which I've discovered, which makes Britain a much bigger, better candidate for solar power than I actually believe was possible. Yeah, because a friend of mine and I, we were asking each other, we were like, why don't they just put just a monstrous solar array in the Sahara Desert?
Yeah.
So it turns out there's two things. The sand covers you have to hire people to constantly clear the sand off them. And and you would have to they don't function as well at high temperatures, which is why, for example, here in Austria, they have a stupid amount of solar panels in a country that gets a pretty good amount of sun, but it's freezing cold for 5 months a year. But they're more efficient in cold weather than they are in hot weather, which is really cool. And it would be the most brilliant way of decentralizing the problem. Is you're giving people a chance to help save the environment and lower Britain's carbon footprint. B, you're putting money in everyone's hands. C, you're kickstarting the economy by getting people to have to install and maintain said solar panels. You just the number of benefits is just endlessly compounding.
Yes. And the same, I think there are 26 million homes in Britain that are badly insulated. The housing stock is pretty poor, not least because they relaxed the regulations on new build. There are so many simple things to be done. Boris, why didn't you get on and do a few of them? But yeah, it's all, but it's the will. And I do think we have exhibited a sort of collective incapacity to face up to this apocalypse, which actually is coming down. And the boiled frog analogy, and we're all sitting here, it's getting warmer, it's getting warmer, it's getting warmer, it's getting warmer, and then we're going to die. And sort of translating that into the will, in Schopenhauer's terms, that okay, we are going to do something now, and we're all going to get on with it. And this thing about the reciprocity, I will if you will. Well, I will, will you? Sort of Tony. And it's like, yeah, does anyone want to, a lot of people, as we've discussed, have terribly good lifestyles. We're all fat and happy, we're content and all the rest of it. A lot of people don't, but a lot of people in the powerful rich countries producing the most pollution are. Well, yeah, but are you just trying to put off the rainy day, put it off, well, just sort of carry on, a bit more air conditioning, so on and so forth? Or are we going to go, look, actually, if we start to get on top of this, if we make a collective decision that, yes, we're going to change our ways of living, which I mean, is going to happen. Doesn't matter. There's an awful lot of people in the world whose ways of living have been changed by climate change already. Just ask anyone from a bushfire to a famine. It's going to happen. So why don't we get on top of it and if you like, take back control rather than oh God, it's all awful. I can't do anything. Well, then we get motivated. It's going to be shit, but let's get on and let's get cracking, as you say. And there are so many things. Okay, what, why, how? If I could chuck that in, so we know what to do. You have just produced one thing there, but the whole string of other things. We know what to do. We know why we've got to do it, because basically, well, the end game is we're all dead. So yeah, let's get on and do it. But the how. So how do you get a major oil company off its addiction to producing oil? Not by shouting at them, but by working with them and saying, okay, what can we do? Now, in order to do that, you've got to have the systems of governing that mean, rather than, oh yeah, we roll over when Shell come through the door and do whatever they want to do, and our policies are this. Well, actually, no, we've got a system of governing constitutions which means we do this. I mean, I think carbon taxes, in the sense that they put a price on the pollution of the planet, the biosphere, nature, or whatever you want to call it, and shifting the economics, is terribly important. Carbon taxes have a role, I think, but as you say, if you just do that in isolation, it's not there. If I can just have a pop, I'm not sure I've had a pop at too many people today. Conventional economists, it's important to remember that conventional economists treat the environment as an externality. In other words, in all of their calculations, it doesn't count. You can pollute it and extract from it as much as you want. And you go, oh, that strikes me as a pretty bad idea. We can't go on like that. But actually, if conventional economics had not treated the environment as an externality for the lifetime of its existence, we wouldn't be in the mess we are. And I do have a forecast, which is in the International Court of Crimes Against Humanity. All conventional economists will be arraigned within fairly short order.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of interesting monetary theories that are being batted around at the minute about what's going to happen with to the economy after this year. I mean, there's a lot of people going to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to be right, but there's a lot of people going to be wrong.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, it's. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know, but I mean, that's the point. Partially, that's the point. We live in this world now of great uncertainty, where you can't. I mean, even if you could policyize an end state into existence, you certainly can't now. So how do you manage? Well, Yeah, I should have said earlier on, actually, what I do is called systems thinking in practice. So it's not about a theory, and theories very well founded, in the office, and then, okay, off we go and do that. It's about taking your theories to a situation of concern and applying them in practice. And of course, in practice, you get feedback and things happen and things are different. And so you adjust what you're doing. But yeah, we're going to need a lot of in practice. What do we do, rather than, yeah, here's a nice announcement from some prime minister or other.
So what would you say to someone who's sitting and listening to this and thinking, no, these guys might have a point. There's something seriously wrong with our political system and maybe electoral system and maybe our economic system. And I would like to do something about it, but I have no idea where to start. Like, well, what do you do? Do you have to, like, I don't know, follow Lawrence Fox on Twitter, who's calling for revolution in the streets? Do you have to, I don't know, just refuse to vote and participate in the system? But that to me never really seemed like it was doing much. Like, where does the ordinary person begin?
Talk. In the over the back fence of the garden, in the pub. I mean, if you're meeting your MP or your councillors, just anyone, talk. Which is, and not least, talk to try and understand why people don't want to do anything. And don't, going back to earlier, don't sort of go, oh, climate deniers, write them off. Climate avoiders, climate ignorers, write them off. Because actually, they are the people who have probably got the best grasp of what to do to maintain their mental health. Because, frankly, if you actually think about and understand the science and where we're going, it's scary stuff. It's depressing stuff. So I look upon climate deniers as, in many respects, very rational people who want to maintain their mental health. The next step then is to say, okay, I've heard of all of these objections, and I speaking to someone the other day who was saying, well, the parts per million, it's all right, and in some respects it's about knowledge and information going, well, actually, if you look at the statistics, they're not all right. But part of it is also understanding that people don't want to change, they don't want to give up their lives. But that, there is a better life awaiting on the other side. So giving them a better vision, giving them some sense that the future, rather than sort of going back to, we're going to be living in caves and wearing sandals and eating turnips, that will actually, this nature thing. It's one of the things. I'm living in North Wales now, and we're very, very connected with nature. There's a roof and some windows that keep the storms and the winds and the rain at bay, but it's very present, and it's in a farming area, sheep farming particularly, cattle farming as well. It's very rural, so that sense of nature, you can't avoid it, unlike if you live in a city. I was sat, contemplating the mountains the other day, and I was thinking, Christ, this is luxury. It's incredible luxury, and yeah, people say, well, you're very lucky. Yeah, I am very lucky. And I know a lot of people aren't lucky, but looking at these mountains, as a piece of luxury, this is far, far better than a Gucci handbag or even a Ferrari, in terms of what it gives me. Yeah. So yeah, you can go off and we sort of, there's a lot of displacement, isn't there, into consumerism, where we buy all this stuff. And I've been having a conversation with my grandchildren, actually. they call me train granddad to distinguish me from the other granddad who is not into trains quite as much as I am. And so train granddad, why don't you buy us presents for our birthdays? And actually, they've got loads of stuff, you know, and they've got the really good parents, they got loads of educational stuff, etc., etc. I said, well,
Hope you didn't say that to them. Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll fix it as much as I can.
So I said to them, look, I really, really struggle to buy stuff which is just going to add to the pile of accumulated, well, the pollution in producing it, and then, you know, typically the plastic pollution off the end of it, but also the notion that somehow this is good for you or is a benefit to you. And I said, well, what I'd really like to do is to put some money into a savings account for you, so that when you get to the age of 18 and you want to go on a gap year, or you or go to college, or indeed just do whatever, you've got a really nice pot of money, and each year, you know, that's building up. And they sort of understood that. And I think in ways of orientating people away from this consumerist addiction, there's an example of what, you know, well, I as an individual can do, every individual can do in terms of the choices we make. But the point about saying, actually, there's this wonderful thing called nature, and if you get into it, it's not just a sort of nice to have and something you ought to do because, you know, it's good for you. It's far better than a Gucci handbag, a Ferrari, or anything else. So those are some things. Yeah, and then some of the other things that we've talked about, which is let us all be demanding of politicians. That, you know, I'm terribly sorry, but you're talking bullshit, you're lying, that's nonsense, that's not going to work. How is that going to work? What on earth are you doing? You know, it's just not good enough, politician X, Y, Z. And us as a populace, you know, we're restless. Well, let's channel that restlessness, and then pushing and demanding that we have to change the systems, as we've discussed.
There's definitely something in that sort of not accepting politicians' bullshit.
Yeah,
like there's a reason that Donald Trump stood on that stage with 11 fucking professional politicians, Republicans, and destroyed them all. Is because he called them on their shit. Like he might have done it in a pretty uncouth way, but he called them all on their shit. He said, "You voted for Iraq. You voted for Iraq. You voted for Iraq," and people cheered. Like the Republicans, the pro-war Republicans, all cheered.
Yeah, and I mean that you see the discourse on television, you know, and you have these pugilistic interviews. You know, it's like Andrew Marr, you know, sort of, you know, and I mean, London journalists have just got heads, you know, they complain about algorithms. Well, they've got heads full of algorithms, you know, and when someone says X, the algorithm goes Y, and why wouldn't you do this? And therefore you're in favor of, and it clicks in. Well, you know, sod off for goodness sake. I'm really not having that. It's a discourse that doesn't get anywhere. Can I chuck in consumer power? Consumer power can be very, very powerful. The classic example was e-numbers. I don't know whether you know, there are these chemicals that go into flavorings and colorings and so on. And they found, was it about, I don't know, 20 years ago, that actually these things were causing hyperactivity and actually a lot worse. And people started, parents, you know, worry about the kids, started going, we need to know what's in them. And by the way, we're not going to buy things. People were spending a lot of time at supermarkets, you know, as you got E1, 2, 3 and E and so on and so forth. And the amount of crap put into sweets by companies has reduced very, very substantially. You can see it in other areas where, you know, sudden shifts occur, and all of a sudden, you know, a company stops doing X or Y or Z. Well, we do have, you know, if we decide to use our consumer power, we can use it. I try and avoid Amazon as much as possible. I see no reason to increase Jeff Bezos' fortune beyond 175 billion.
Oh no, come on. That's like who can get by on 175 billion? Like that's chump change. Like,
yeah. I mean, it does emphasize the point, actually, you know, about inheritance tax, doesn't it? It's like, so, okay, we've got an existing economic system, with financial system, and so on. So, you know, the bloke has got 175 billion. Okay, I understand that. Now, we're going to give it to his children. Hello? What's the economic value in giving it to his children? What's the moral justification for giving it to his children? There is none whatsoever. It's complete lunacy. In fact, if you took that money and said, right, this in effect is becoming a COP. We've got a very good model here. We're going to give all of that money back as dividends, as the co-op used to do, to its members. The members are people who bought stuff at Amazon. And you disperse its ownership, in effect, into a mutual. And then we say, okay, you know, having that kind of monopoly, but actually mutually owned, might not be such a bad thing. So, you know, yet another thing that would be relatively simple to do. I can't remember where we were going, Josh. Sorry.
No, neither can I. I once said to my mum about just like a really offhand thing. I can't remember why it came up, and I was like, well, you know, if you really wanted like the fairest system in the world, you'd have 100. If you wanted like the purest meritocracy, you would have 100% inheritance tax.
Yeah.
And she looked at me horrified because she wants to obviously leave her house to me, which I am very grateful of, obviously. But she was horrified. She was like, hang on, wait, you mean I worked all this time for this house and now I can't give it to my children?
Yeah. and it's a very interesting thing, because in the sense that, you know, with that whole, I want to help my children. Of course, we all want to help our children. But does that mean, therefore, we need to give 175 billion to Bezos? Yeah. How about just leaving them with $1 billion? I mean, is that, or maybe just 100 million? Or, you know, so, I mean, there's a cutoff, you know, where you know, is it 1 million? Is it 10 million? Fine. Okay. You can have your house, Josh. But
you're working with such like unfathomable amounts of money. Like I heard this stat like once, this year somewhere. I can't remember where I read it, but it was if you say you're just an average Joe in the year 0 AD, right? Jesus just got, is it AD? Is it when he was born? I know it's not quite right, but anyway, 0 AD. You're working like a nice job as like a I don't know, a smith or something, but for whatever reason, you're getting paid $2,000 a month, right? And that's not going to change. In the next 2,000 years, you work your 40-hour work week. You take your like 2 weeks of holiday every year, and you get to the year 2020, having worked for $2,000 an hour, right? For 2,000 years. And you arrive in 2020, there are still 42 people in America richer than you. Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd, isn't it? I mean, the world has gone nuts. I mean, it's completely nuts, and it needs to change. And it needs to change pretty damn quickly.
So how hopeful are you, as a final question, for the future of Britain?
I've often said, I mean, this, you just may sound horrible and don't take it that way, but I had mixed views about Trump losing last time.
No, me too.
Fine, yeah, in the sense that, yeah, he's a complete and utter arsehole, but in the sense that Biden represents a return to the status quo. It's more social democracy sticking plasters on the problems as such. Marcus Rashford has been doing great work on free school meals, and obviously if you are getting a free school meal now, that's important. But it's like, when are the celebrities going to go, well, actually, yeah, free school meals, but they are sticking plasters. Yeah, what we need is fundamental systems change. So I was ambivalent about the Brexit referendum, in the sense that it's a disruptor. It's thrown everything in the air. I mean, good old Johnson and his collection of people from posh boys' schools and chances, going to make it even worse. But my sense is the thing has to get worse before it can get better. And if you look historically, that's the case. So how optimistic am I? I mean, you see, Britain never does revolutions. Well, it did one with Cromwell, and then Cromwell screwed it up. Ironically, but by the authoritarian, controlling, power-driven nonsense that sort of sometimes comes out in apparently left-wing people. And yeah, so Britain doesn't really do revolutions, unfortunately. So I guess we're just going to sort of continue in this decline all the while, pretending that actually we're somehow this sort of great power and we're terribly important, and we won the World Cup 3,000 years ago, and whoa, isn't that all of that nonsense? I mean, he can't even get his metaphors right, So in Wales, we've had a lockdown, which is the fire break. We've called it the fire break. Oh, sorry, the government's called it, the Welsh government. So a fire break in a forest, here's the fire, it's raging, and then you cut a fire break so it can't get to the next bunch of trees. So that sounds sensible. You've got the virus, you cut this break, and it can't get to the next set of trees. They called it a circuit breaker in Westminster. It shows, just how ignorant they are of science, technology, engineering, anything other than sort of loose, woolly, politicized thinking. Right, a circuit breaker is, you've got a high current coming along, you've got a switch, you break the circuit, and so that's fine, there's no electricity. You then put the switch back, and the electricity keeps flowing. It's just like, you can't even get a metaphor right. So,
I hadn't thought of it like that. That's amazing. I like the phrase irritated me when I heard it, but I hadn't like really thought it out like that. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's sort of, when you've got a government by metaphor and it can't even get the metaphor straight, well, what hope is there? I mean, I don't know. I hope I've got children and grandchildren. I hope, but I don't think that. I don't see. Well, I'm going to work at change, like you are, Josh. I'm going to continue to do what I can to foment revolution, and just getting people to think differently. And I'm going to carry on talking to people. Yeah, sorry, that's quite a depressing ending, really, isn't it?
That's all right. Look, Peter Hitchens told me that I shouldn't be hopeful. I should because that's the road to misery. So, like, that's not.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite as depressing as that. So it's all right.
Yeah, there's a philosopher, isn't there, who begins with M. He's well known. God, what's his name? Incidentally, I think the guy you were referring to earlier on about the somewhere people and the nowhere people is David Goodhart.
David Goodhart, that's it. David Sumter wrote a book on called Outnumbered. Sorry, you're right. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Well, but yes, this has been an absolute pleasure. A lot of fun and educational, interesting. Hopefully not just for me, but for people listening.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, for me as well, Josh. And I mean, you're well. I'm going to get much more into your work, and your work sounds really, really good.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I like to think, hopefully, that the world isn't coming to an end, and that I have a lot of time to get better at doing what I'm doing. But I'm trying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in some ways, I think you've got longer to experience what's going to happen than I have. So Yeah, be interesting to see.
Oh yeah, strap yourselves in, folks. It's all, you never know what's gonna happen. I always say, I always make the joke that the people in 1938 probably thought that was as bad as it could get when Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
They were like, no, it can't get any worse than this.
No. And of course, appeasement, of Hitler, appeasement of climate change is, there's great parallels there. Everyone's trying to appease it. I'm terribly sorry you can't appease it. I mean, it's you've got to get on and do something.
Well, that's a lovely note to end. I will link all your stuff in your podcast, your books, and everything in the description below if anyone wants to check out. But yeah, thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Josh.
Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list. And don't forget, my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.